These are the processes shaping and reshaping our Earth. Temperatures ranging to 1200 degrees centigrade and pressures which makes plastic the solid rock of the Earth's crust. This process, slow in terms of human lifespan, is the dynamic continuation of the genesis of Earth and is seldom witnessed by man, except when earthquakes rend his cities and volcanoes bury his lands.
I am Walter Sullivan, and this is a report on Project Famous, a joint French-American investigation of the Mid-Atlantic Rift Valley, an area where the lithosphere, or rigid surface layer, is thinnest, and the tectonic processes responsible for continental drift are the most evident. If we were to view the Atlantic Ocean and its bordering continents from a point in space, and with X-ray vision see the bottom of the ocean, perhaps we would see it divided like this. Instead of a solid crust or lithosphere, there would be separate pieces called plates, tectonic plates. In this particular area of the Earth's lithosphere, the plates are diverging or pulling apart. The dividing line between the African and North American tectonic plates is thus known as a divergent plate boundary. It is at this boundary of creation that new Earth's surface is being created as the two continents drift apart. The width of these boundaries is surprisingly sharp and distinct, and not more than a few hundred meters wide. To chart the relative positions of the seafloor features in this narrow zone will require first-hand observations by man in free-diving submersibles. Scientists have now planned that bold step. Understanding the processes that are occurring along plate boundaries is the objective of Project Famous, being carried out by the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution and CNEXO, the French National Center of Ocean Exploitation. Support for the American participation in this 3-year project comes from the National Science Foundation and NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
Here.
This is Iceland, a land of fire and water, volcano and glacier side by side. This tiny island in the North Atlantic is the product of tectonics, of land-building processes in the continuing evolution of Earth. For millions of years, as an emergent peak of the northern mid-Atlantic ridge, it has been shaped and reshaped, and the process is still going on, imperceptibly most of the time, but occasionally very apparent, as when the island of Surtsey was formed in 1965 off the coast of Iceland, and again when Heimaey was engulfed by lava and ash in early 1973. These grotesquely eroded volcanic extrusions, these bubbling mud pots and steam vents, are extensions of the forces alive within the heart of Iceland. Man has lived with these forces for 1,000 years and is now harnessing the latent energy beneath his tidy pastures and quiet villages. The capital, Reykjavik, is heated almost completely by hot water from wells drilled into the volcanically active lithosphere. A few hundred yards from here, 1,000 years ago, the world's first parliament met in a natural amphitheater formed by the forces that are pulling the Atlantic Ocean apart along its center line. To the right is a great plate, a great rigid section of the Earth's surface, the lithosphere, which is being pushed to the east, carrying with it Europe, Asia, and all of the Atlantic Ocean to the east of Iceland. And to the west is the North American plate, all of the North Atlantic, west of Iceland, and all of North America. And as these plates are pulled apart, lava wells up along the seam between them, forming the mid-Atlantic ridge, and where the upwelling has been intense for millions of years, forming Iceland, so that the mountains here rise about 2 miles above the deep ocean floor. This rifting, this pulling apart of the Atlantic Ocean has created fissures along the mid-Atlantic ridge. And here in Iceland, these fissures can be seen above the surface of the sea. This great rift valley has widened several hundred feet by the same process that has widened the distance between Europe and America by several hundred feet since that first Parliament met here. 3,000 miles to the south of Iceland rise other peaks of a similar oceanic mountain range, one that extends eastward from the mid-Atlantic ridge. These peaks are the Azores, as idyllic as they were a century ago when our whaling fleets crowded the port of Ponta Delgada with visiting whalemen from Gloucester, New Bedford, and Sag Harbor. Today, the ships are oceanographic research vessels from Woods Hole, Massachusetts, and Toulon, France, and the men are marine geologists. 5 degrees of longitude to the west of the Azores is a sector of the Rift Valley they have come to investigate. For 3 years, France and America have been carrying out researches preparatory to this phase of the joint deep-sea Project Famous, the acronym for French-American Mid Ocean Undersea Study. 10,000 feet below these surface vessels, fossil magnetic fields in Rift Valley rocks may reveal the manner of their origin, and scientists in these submersibles may discover outcroppings which will enable them to define better the structural cross-section of the mid-Atlantic ridge and its median valley. In the depths beneath these otherwise calm seas, the diving scientists will also search for hydrothermal circulation within the sea floor, a process by which most of the world's veins of metallic ores were probably formed, and search for evidence of volcanic activity in the Rift Valley. Though their continents are drifting apart, France and America have joined technical forces and facilities for this deep-sea project, part of a long-range undersea investigation. A year earlier, men and machines were being forged for this phase of the project, the long, delicate probe to the deep-sea exposures of the Earth's lithosphere by manned submersibles.
Can you get any of yours in?
Here at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in Massachusetts, Alvin, an American submersible, is undergoing a complete refitting. The new 4-ton titanium sphere is guided into place. This pressure-proof shell is designed for 12,000-foot depths and will carry the most sensitive instruments of science, the hand and mind of man, to the bottom of the Rift Valley. A final dry test takes place at Annapolis, Maryland, in the world's largest and most sophisticated pressure testing tank, the Ocean Pressure Laboratory of the U.S. Navy. Simultaneously, on the French coast, the French teams are readying their 2 submersibles, the Archimède and the Cyana. Equipment is tested and plans and procedures are rehearsed for their own work in the deep canyons of the Mid-Atlantic Rift Valley. Then, French and American teams meet and confer at Woods Hole.
This small submersible has a big quality. She is very because shipped with one starboard and one port. Each of the two propellers has a power of 3 horsepower.
For communication, Marcel Lebihan is in communication with the arm and also makes distance measurements.
And it would be a great asset to have some sort of comparison of an area exposed on land where similar processes may be taking place. And in January of this year, a small party of French scientists and submersible pilots visited in the French territory of the Azores and Isas, just south of the Red Sea, and where the structures and the general regional setting are extremely similar to those of the Rift Valley as we see it under the ocean.
One of the things we want to do during the course of this cruise is to start incremental dives. Since we have a new titanium sphere in the submarine, we'd like to start with a 100-foot dive off Provincetown, do a series of engineering tests, and then start proceeding over to the other dive sites within the Gulf of Maine, progressing deeper and deeper, and then ending the halfway through the cruise with a 1,000-foot dive. Then,
Robert Ballard, one of the diving scientists on the project, explains the plan for test diving Alvin.
And then incrementally dive deeper until we finally attain the new depth of the titanium sphere, which is 12,000 feet.
If you look on the extreme left over here, you can see kind of a gap which goes into Kilauea Iki. That's where the famous 1959 eruption was. The lava then flooding the floor just to the right-hand side of that wall on the left is the August 1971 lava.
Jim Moore, another of the diving scientists on the famous project and volcanologist for the U.S. Geological Survey. Here in Hawaii, he is orienting in the Mid-Atlantic Rift Valley.
The whole island and all of the islands of Hawaii are constructed basically of nothing but basaltic lava flows. So what we're going to do is walk across the caldera floor and end up on the other side of Halemaumau.
Off the coast of Hawaii, an 80-foot dive to a submarine lava flow is an experience designed to familiarize the submersible crew with the many different shapes and textures of lava, each revealing manners of origin, composition, and magnitude. Now, with the preparations and testing over, Alvin is leaving Woods Hole, Massachusetts, for the Azores and the famous dive site. The submersible tender, Lulu, from which Alvin will operate, will be towed to the operational site by the research vessel Noor. "13 sunrises, easy days, calm seas. Time for relaxing, for reading, for sunning, time for checking gear and for painting, and time for tending a cactus garden at sea." A pinpoint position in the mid-Atlantic is reached, and the scientists and crews of the Noor and Lulu and the submersible Alvin begin work while the short season of favorable sea conditions lasts. Here, 360 miles west of the Azores, scientists on the Nore are recording temperatures along the sea floor and collecting water samples for chemical analysis. Rocks and sediments from the sea floor itself are collected by dredge and special boring devices. All of these small pieces in the puzzle of tectonics to be sorted out and put into perspective later on. Scientists thus hope to identify the tectonic processes which occur at plate boundaries and find clues to the dynamics of continental drift. But there is much more data that must be collected. Data that instruments on long cables from surface vessels cannot gather. Only the selective hand and eye of man in a free-diving craft can do this. So Alvin will be launched and recovered again. A score of dives to the sea bottom are planned for Alvin this summer. Here is the end of the initial 9-hour test dive to the bottom of the Rift Valley. Alvin is ready to explore and chart as much of the Rift Valley as the short season will allow. We will now follow Alvin and its 3-man crew through one of the dives to the median valley through some 9,000 feet of blackness, one of the 16 dives totaling 81 hours on the bottom.
Read you the same. Stand by for a phone check. Roger. Blower's on. EQC is on. Tracking finger's on. Leaks brown. And dump circuits are normal. I have no joy on my thermometer. Ready to dive. Permission to dive, over.
Roger. Your altitude 2050 meters. Dive when ready.
Blue Alvin diving.
Lulu, this is Alvin, passing 2,000 meters, altitude 200 meters, over.
Roger.
Lulu, this is Alvin, my depth 2222 meters on the bottom, over.
Roger.
Lulu, this is Alvin. Position looks good. Over.
Roger.
Alvin, roger. Lulu, this is Alvin. We plan to make station 1 at this point. Can you give us a 6? Over.
Alvin, Lulu, stand by. Alvin, Lulu, request a course change to 150, over.
The tracking, navigation, and communication system is a complex one, tying the surface vessels, the submersible, and the precisely positioned transponders or sonic beacons into a rigid, synchronized network extending nearly 2 miles down to the ocean bottom. A shipboard computer prints a readout of the relative position of Alvin by fixing its own position from the transponders, then relaying a subsequent signal from Alvin through the transponders to a third shipboard channel. Alvin is then advised of its position on a chart of the area by a grid system relative to the transponders, thereby positively charting the locations of rock specimens collected.
Alvin, Lulu, your position, time 11:03, X 62.8, Y 37.8, over.
Understand our position is X 62.8, Y 37.8. Is that correct? Over.
Roger.
Let me just check to see, put my finger in there. Anything that's good. No. It's so cool. Alright, let's still keep it in the core. Just note that it got a bit disturbed.
Water sample number 4 is station number 2. Station number 3 is water sample number 6.
Okay.
Station number 6 is water sample number 2.
They don't even have much manganese on them.
No, they don't. Look at all the different colors. Actually, when we got it, it was a bright red down the bottom. Is this the pteropods? Yeah, look at them. It's in there. Pteropods.
Right.
That's what forms that black
Yeah, the
cover.
black deposit. Yeah, that's a neat collection, isn't it?
The submarine Alvin, with its 3 occupants, is back safely from dive 535. It was its 16th dive of Project Famous, next to the last probably in its exploration of the mid-Atlantic median valley. Descents that have carried it down 9,000 feet into the Rift Valley and the transverse canyons that set it off here and there.
The thing that impressed me the most was how terribly torn up and fractured the whole floor was.
The scientists and pilots of Alvin reflect on their discoveries and on their subjective impressions.
Lava forms look a lot like what we saw in Hawaii.
I think the submarine is a tremendous tool for gathering data on the bottom, where scientists can be on the scene, observe directly what they're gathering, what its relation is to other features around it.
For years we looked at the ocean in a very general way, but now we have a pretty good feel for that.
The pilot is always trying to look out into the edge of the light, see something new and see something you've never seen before.
It has such a beautiful newness about it. But God made it yesterday and nobody has had time to muck it up yet. You know, I was thinking back on all this, I really would like to take another 20 dives.
Well, when you consider how much we learned in 17 dives, you know, here we'd looked for 3 years at this area from the surface, thousands and thousands of photographs taken from the surface. And it frightened us, at least it frightened me, to think how in the dickens was I going to figure all this out. And yet when we got down the first 2 or 3 dives, it fell into place.
Look at that submarine as an excellent training tool for anybody in marine science. Anybody interested in the seafloor ought to have a couple of dives in it.
All of us on their first high.
These are the men and machines of the joint French-American deep sea Project Famous, perhaps the most detailed and concentrated inner space effort to date. Dr. James Hertzler, chief scientist of the American team on the project, sums up the findings and conclusions to date.
Yes, the correlating of this data and the examination of these unique sediment and rock samples will take months and years. When that is done, we should have a much better idea about how the seafloor is formed, and in fact how the crust of the Earth is formed. We already can discern several things from the initial data. One of these is that along the centerline of the Rift Valley floor, most of the seafloor is being formed. We have very fresh volcanic forms there in an area that is not more than 100 meters wide. I think the second, probably most significant point that struck us in this project thus far is that the fissures that parallel the Rift Valley suggest in a very important way that the volcanic activity which produce the seafloor is in fact very close beneath the seafloor, probably much closer than we anticipated before. The exact width of this volcanic zone beneath the seafloor and how fast the seafloor is moving and more subtle points such as this can only await further analysis. Extensive manganese coatings of the rocks, that observation by the French of what seemed a hydrothermal vent, apparently bear on the process of ore formation.
But will we, after the data is processed, realize the most ambitious objective, identifying the underlying processes responsible for plate tectonics and for continental drift? That remains to be seen.
.54 and 09 seconds, heading quickly to the right, and going up slope a little bit more to take a core off the outcropping looking material. The sediment cover on this outcrop is fairly thin, and bedding dips about 20 degrees to my right on our heading 273. 12:28, 36 seconds, still trying to find a good rock on station number 4. We're driving more or less along this essentially smooth, level sediment full of animal tracks, burrows and worms and occasional patches of the cobbles.